We found an area of land that had been burnt and decided to use that as the culvert of Mordor, where some of the early sequences of the third film was shot.
So we'd put our wall across here, culvert spilling out, and the Hobbit's pretty much where Brett is. It was just this scene of desolation, all the beautiful sort of tree trunks all there with their limbs all sticking out all black, and the ground around sort of grey and black. A battlefield. It's like what the World War I Passchendaele type battlefield. So we sort of walked down in amongst it, and on the ground was a sort of layer of probably 2 or 3 inches of ash and burnt sort of foliage.
It had burnt not by human activity, it just burnt on its own. So we're very lucky to have found that, because it would have been a very difficult place to have staged.
You certainly got the feeling that it was the destruction of Mordor, that sort of destruction of life.
The location for the fallen king that Sam and Frodo come across, that was shot in this amazing place called Makara, which is basically towards the southern coast outside of Wellington.
We hadn't really had a lot of time to scout for potential locations, and ultimately we did so, but it was kind of fairly close to the time when we needed to shoot it. Peter didn't have an opportunity to come out and visit it, and it ended up being a farm. This is the Makara location proposed for the Morgul Crossroads. I'm looking here at the moment at the way that we would approach it coming towards us here. This direction here is towards Minas Morgul, and the road that comes down and meets the road, which will sort of cross here. One direction goes up the main access route into the site, which we'll address as far as these fallen logs up in the middle of the frame there, and then it'll come down in front of us here, sweep around and go up this hill here.
It's an incredibly windy place, and that's why you get this great look of these windswept trees that have been sort of pushed around by these huge winds that come between the two islands, the North and the South Island.
That was a great benefit to us. These great shaped trees with these partly dead limbs sticking out of them at odd angles was part of their beauty.
The Dunharrow encampment itself was shot in this beautiful location on the opposite side from Queenstown on Lake Wakatipu.
And the place we filmed was 3/4 around that lake in a place called Greenstone.
Greenstone River is one of the most beautiful and good fishing river too. I don't know now, it's probably so popular from these movies.
Possible Dunharrow establishing at night. Army way down below there.
It was a 2-hour drive from Queenstown, and a lot of it was over windy gravel road, and in some places only one lane. So it was logistically a very difficult location to get to, particularly given that they wanted 200 horses and riders out there.
And I know there was a lot of discussion about trying to find a more logistical friendly location. But we did look around a lot of places for the Dunharrow camp, but we never found anywhere as good as the Greenstone that had a field and it had trees, and it was just a perfect layout.
The Dunharrow Plateau, we actually filmed it at a little quarry in Mount Victoria in Wellington.
Peter's original concept was that we would shoot half the camp, like a split screen, and then move it over and then shoot the other half.
That was filmed just around the bay from where I was living in Wellington.
It was a disused quarry that had sort of grassed over and was part of the town belt, which is sort of park area in the middle of town. A lot of the shots that we filmed of the Dunharrow Plateau were done there.
There was enough room to put, about 8 tents on there, space in between, and have this rocky kind of, foliage behind it. And that's where we shot the physical location of Aragorn walking across from his tent to Theoden's tent.
So we basically had one location that was in Wellington, the other down in the deep south, and they brought them together with CGI, and it made it look like it was all in one place.
When we came to Lord of the Rings, we were thinking about where we could shoot the approach to the Paths of the Dead through the Drummerberg mountain range. Actually, that's bad in here, really. It's not too bad. It's a possibility we should think about for the Dimholt Road. We looked around, but we couldn't find anywhere else. And I remembered the pinnacles.
The Patangirua Pinnacles. That's a really amazing formation of rocks and shingle just on the south coast of the Wairarapa, just out of Wellington.
My parents took me there when I was a kid. I'd been to the Pinnacles 2 or 3 times, ever since my childhood.
We flew by helicopter from Wellington across the bays to these very fine peaks. It was an incredible location.
It's this very eroded valley with this kind of limestone rock formations where it's just eroded away and left these incredible fingers of stone pointing up into the sky.
A lot of it looks a lot like the Badlands in South Dakota. Just sort of a seemingly lifeless place. Perfect for the Paths of the Dead. Just this very forbidding, harsh environment.
It was a great spot to do the Dimholt Road, which leads to the Path of the Dead, because it has these incredibly steep, narrow sort of crevices.
This is, I think, Dimholt Road, the best one we've seen, which is quite broad. Getting tighter and tighter all the time. There is an issue to do with probably a hard hat area in a way, because stones fall.
You had to be careful when you went into narrow caverns, because it is so unstable that a huge rock could fall from a height and do you damage. Each one of us there would look around and you had a sense of it being quite a special geographical place.
Pelennor Fields is a major sequence in the film. This is the ground right between Osgiliath and Minas Tirith. We looked for a flat plains that had some hills in the background.
We also wanted to have that feeling like, almost like fields of grain could have been planted there. It kind of had that, beigey sort of dry ground landscape.
We found a location in the middle of the South Island of New Zealand, a small town called Twizel.
In an area called Mackenzie Country. A lot of Scottish people live there. It's the original settlers there were Scottish, and Mackenzie being a colourful character that the area is sort of named after from the 19th century.
The communities there were basically built up for all these hydro dams that had been created to take advantage of the different lakes and waterways that were in that area.
And Twizel was built as a town to house the workers that built this hydroelectric system. And then as the dams were built, the town sort of dwindled, and then over time it's become somewhat of a retirement community, and people have moved into these housing that were originally built to house the workers on the dams.
Twizel was like, you bring a lot of books to Twizel, and you bring a lot of music, and you're aware of the fact that you're probably going to go to bed early. I mean, they had one bar where we played pool quite a lot.
The property we filmed on there was Ben O'Howe Station, which is run by Simon Cameron, who's a descendant of some of those original Scottish people. And
we used that same field for filming both Baramir's charge towards Osgiliath and also the attack of the riders of the Rohirrim as they swept down towards the Orcs.
There is a little hillock just over here which would be good for that third and coming up onto the rise, and it's quite steep on the other side, so you get a fast reveal.
It's a very bleak, in the middle of nowhere, snow-capped mountains completely surrounding it. Stunningly beautiful. It's rolling tussock land.
Twizel's a gorgeous place. It's absolutely stunning. And on my few minutes off that I had down there, I'd drive around the area and just have a bit of a peekaboo, and pretty impressive.
It's a remarkable spot because you've got this beautiful plateau to be able to do these really grand shots, and in the distance are these amazing mountains. You've got Mount Cook off in the distance, Mount Aspiring, the whole Southern Alps range. It was a beautiful place to shoot. It didn't just fit the storytelling well, it was also great just to kind of be there as a visitor.
The Black Gates, we were on around the other side of Ruapehu, off Desert Road in a place called the Rangipo Desert.
We location scouted all around New Zealand for this location, which was a very particular look outside the Black Gates. I guess the purpose of this recce is to nail down a position for where these soldiers would be and where Aragorn, just know whereabouts we're going to shoot.
Yes.
And nail down a position for the Black Gates.
It's this area that is unlike any other part of New Zealand, really. It looks like New Mexico or something.
It was flat and it was, it was kind of like a desert, and it was just a nice place to film it. There was nothing around 360.
So we're basically looking for a sort of a bit of raised ground in front of a big bit of flat ground with a bit of raised ground that we can park some soldiers on. The only place we could find that was expansive enough and had the right terrain was a piece of the military training area near Mount Ruapehu in the central North Island. And in fact, within this whole military training area, which is 20 or 30 miles in circumference, there was only one place in the middle of that was really suitable with the featureless flat sands, and we looked around there with the army and we said, look, this is perfect. This is exactly where we need to shoot this scene. Great, we finally found it. You can't believe how hard it's been to find this location. We've searched all around the country and here it is. This is just amazing. And they looked at us kind of horrified and they said, well, this is our live firing zone. And we've basically been dropping bombs and firing artillery shells into this area for the last 30 years.
Before they would let us use this as a location, they first sent out a party to clear any live rounds that hadn't gone off.
The Rangipo Desert Firing Range location gave us these specific geographical things we needed. Plus, it was just big enough to be able to get huge numbers of people out there and never feel like you were sort of losing, any of the view, as well as just inspiring us because it was such a grand place to be in.
The locations that we used for Return of the King for Mordor were pretty much the same locations, certainly the same geographical area in New Zealand as the Emyn landscapes for Two Towers. It's a volcano called Ruapehu, and there's various areas around the volcano that we shot elements of Mordor.
Mount Ruapehu is basically in the central plateau of the North Island. It was one of our main North Island locations. It's still an active volcano. In 1995, there was quite huge eruptions and areas had to be evacuated.
We couldn't shoot the peaks because the peaks themselves were sacred to the local iwi, the Maori tribes that come from that area. That's why, in the end, when you see Mount Doom, it's sometimes, in terms of the frame, not far from where actually Mount Ruapehu would be standing, but instead we have our, created version of Mount Doom. But Mount Ruapehu had that same size, it was just gigantic.
Being at the foot of an active volcano, it still has a lot of geothermal activity that's happening there.
Last night we were sitting in the lodge about 11:30 and felt the lodge shudder and some noise. Thought the generator had cracked itself and rushed outside and no problem, but we just smelt the sulphur in the air, and this morning we came out and it's all grey. So it did have a very minor, what we would call a belch.
And I know that there was that whole thing when we were there of please don't let this happen again, because, if it was going to happen to any film, it was going to happen to us, but it would have been fabulous. We would have just shot it.
We must be crazy working up here on a work party and things like that on a volcano.
Mount Ruapehu, all the way up there was really tough because it's a hard location. It's hard to get up to.
It's actually also a ski resort or ski field, complete with a lodge and chair lifts. And when it's not ski season, you can actually take the chairlift up before lunch and then to come back down for lunch. It was really cool. And then it was time to go back to work, so we get on the chairlift and go back up to the mountain and cry and suffer.
So the Whakapapa ski field on one side of Ruapehu, that was used for a lot of the salmon Frodo crawling up, working their way up Mount Doom.
Then on the other side of the mountain, there's a place called Takino, another ski area, much more rugged, isolated, basic, less refined area, really high up on the mountain towards the cone of the volcano. There's this one ravine that during the eruption just got washed out by this molten lava that just came screaming down this ravine and carved out this huge ravine. And I thought, wow, that's a great shot. That's Frodo and Sam coming